Hi, welcome to the Nurture Nature Show. I am the Reverend Dr. LoraKim Joyner of One Earth Conservation and Ministry. I serve as wildlife veterinarian and Unitarian Universalist minister. During our time together, we will have a chance to nurture ourselves so that we can nurture all of nature. Welcome into this community of hope and nourishment and solidarity with all of life. Hi, I'm the Reverend Dr. LoraKim Joyner.
And I'm the Reverend Dr. Meredith Garmon.
We are both Unitarian Universalist ministers.
And married to each other.
Today's theme is spirituality, nurturing and naturing one of our most wonderful intelligences. And it's a tricky subject, and that's why I've asked Meredith to be with us today. He is the senior minister at the Community Unitarian Universalist Congregation at White Plains, and he's also a Zen practitioner for many years. And I'm hoping that he can shed some light on this topic and understand how this could nurture us and all of nature. So what is spirituality? I mean, is it something we can get our heads around or perhaps measure?
Well, I do think that it's an important part of nurturing our nature. Our spirituality is our nature, and through that we can connect to the wider world of plants and animals and ecosystems as well. It's important to start off by recalling that we're not so much thinking about a supernatural, ephemeral thing. There's a part of the brain that processes and produces emotions, the limbic system. There's a part of the brain, the upper cortex, that's responsible for abstract thinking. And there isn't a single part of the brain that is your spiritual center, but spirituality does refer to the overall interrelationship between the various parts of the brain. It's there in the neuron. So we're not talking about a non-physical thing. And some psychologists and psychiatrists have devised some ways for measuring it. I was fascinated by the work of a Dr. Robert Cloninger, who devised temperament and character inventory. And so by looking at people's answers to certain questions, he could assess three things. There were three parts to the temperament and character inventory that had to do with spirituality, that had to do with what Cloninger called self-transcendence, that capacity to be unpretentious and humble, present, rather than practical and materially oriented and more controlling. The first feature was self-forgetfulness, that practice or that tendency to get lost in what you're doing, to just lose the sense of self because you're so immersed in the tennis that you're playing or the pot that you're throwing or the musical instrument that you're playing. To just, whatever the activity is, the self tends to drop away, and there's just no concern or even sense of self being there. You just are the activity. And the second one is transpersonal identification, that ability to see yourself in others, and to see others as yourself. You know, we have this saying, there but for the grace of God go I. Well, transpersonal identification goes a step farther than that. It's not that some good luck saves you from a fate that others. Nothing saves you from that fate. It is your fate because they are you. That's that strong sense of transpersonal identification. And the third feature is acceptance, our capacity to accept what's happening, even the hard parts, even the tragic parts. And that doesn't mean complacency, because we can accept reality for exactly what it is, even as we're working to change it. But there's a total acceptance that, yes, this really is the fact of the matter. We're not in denial about that. We're fully present to what it is, even perhaps as we work to change it, we can understand why it's there, where it came from, what it is, and we can accept all of those things.
So let me see. We have the three different things that you talked about: the forgetfulness, the transcendence, and the acceptance. What do they all add up to? I'm thinking that you're almost talking about self-transcendence. Is that the sum of all those three parts?
Right. You add up the three scores, your sub-score for self-forgetfulness, your sub-score for transpersonal identification, your sub-score for acceptance. You add up those three together and you get what Cloninger calls your self-transcendence score, which is just his word, I think, for spirituality. It gives you a score for spirituality. And if you look for Cloninger temperament and character index, then you can find a way to take that index online. I believe there is a charge.
Oh, there's a charge to know how much spirituality that you've got. So here's what I'm wondering. I mean, this is all sounding pretty formal, like you get online and you take a test, but I wonder if informally, how do you know you've got spirituality? What is it that it actually looks like? I wonder if you could say something about that, Meredith.
Oh, sure. What we notice, what people notice in themselves as they begin to develop spiritually, are certain indicators. They're not always there. They're not there for everybody. And nobody has them all the time. But you notice an increase in these characteristics. Symptoms of spirituality include an increased tendency to let things happen rather than make them happen. There's a sense of, I don't have to control this. My job is to be present to this, to be in a loving relationship with whatever it is, but I don't have to make it happen. I just have to bring all of who I am to that situation. Another symptom would be more frequent attacks of smiling from the heart, that full openness of joy that just expresses itself in a sincere and spontaneous smile. Also, more frequent feelings of being connected with others and with nature. I think spirituality fundamentally is connection, a sense of connectedness. We begin to see that the self is kind of an illusion, really, that we are a network of relationships. And it's not that there's a self that has these relationships. We are just a network of relationships. And as we increase and we work on, we develop our awareness of that, we get more frequent feelings of being connected with others and with nature. Another one would be more frequent episodes of overwhelming appreciation. Gratitude is the base fundamental touchstone, if you will, the touchstone of spiritual development, spiritual maturity, spiritual growth, is that sense of just being thankful for everything, for anything, whatever it is, even if it seems to be painful, there's a sense of gratitude for it. Another one would be the decisions flow more from intention or spontaneity and less from fears based on past experience. We're coming at the situations we find ourselves less from, how do I protect myself? How do, that fearful sense of, I just need to keep myself safe. Remembering past experiences that were not so good, and we really want that not to happen. Instead, it flows from intention. But what we mean by intention is it flows from your decision to be a caring, compassionate, present person in that situation. And it flows spontaneously. It's like you don't plan it all out. You're there, and you let it creatively unfold the way you feel called and the situation calls you to let it unfold. Another one would be greater ability to enjoy each moment. As each thing happens, can you be there and just tasting it for all that it has? Also, decreased worrying. So we're talking about increases in all these other areas. There are some areas where you'll experience decrease. You're not thinking so much about the future. You're not worrying about you're not having anxiety about what's going to happen next, and that's part of letting go of that urge to control things, and it's part of being in the present rather than in the future. Another one would be decreased interest in conflict, in interpreting the actions of others, in judging others, or in judging yourself. There's just a less interest in shoulding all the time, shoulding yourself or shoulding others. You should do this. You should. It's just what is rather than what should be, and being fully present to that. And you lose interest in that judgmentalism. Another one, increased non-judgmental curiosity. So somebody comes at you and it might seem confrontational, but you're just able to not judge yourself or them, but to just be curious. Wow, where is this coming from? What is this all about? This is just very interesting. And another one would be increased capacity to love in return without expecting anything in return. Just that giving without expectation. It's not a deal. It's not a bargain. It's just your capacity to love wants to be expressed. And increased receptivity to kindness offered, and increased interest in extending kindness to others. So when people do things for us, we can just appreciate it and be open and receptive to that, and experience the full joy of that. And we have increased interest in extending that kindness to others when we're happy to be receiving it for ourselves. So those are characteristics that we often see people who have been developing in their spiritual area exhibit.
Well, now, when you were doing that wonderful list, it's sort of like I had a paradox going on inside of me. I was thinking two different things. One is I was remembering the movie Groundhog Day, where the one character is giving a list of everything she wants in the perfect mate, and Bill Murray hears the list and goes, "Oh, me, yes, me, totally me, check, I so have got this." And that's been my experience of other people too, is that, you go through a list of what spirituality is, and they go, "Oh, I've so got that, I've so got that." And at the same time, we go through the list and go, "I do that all the time, I don't have any of that." And we're judgmental about ourselves for not being more enlightened, especially those of us that maybe work in social work and service and in religious and spiritual things. So it seems to me, Meredith, that there's a paradox here, a paradox of judgmentalism. We're looking to see if we're not judgmental, and so we're judging ourselves or judging others for being too judgmental. So help us out of this mess. Could you do that?
Well, that's the hazard of talking about spirituality. We're in this kind of way. We are judging ourselves for being too judgmental. We're making those judgments, and what I like about that list is that all the way down it says more, or less in the case of like decreased worrying. Wherever you are, no matter how much you think, yes, that's me, it's a path. There's always more to be got. There's always further progress to go. There's always further developing those muscles. But this judgmentalism, I mean, you point to something very important. What is Cloninger doing with his surveys to try to measure this thing about spirituality when it's all about not holding yourself up to standards? It's about accepting yourself exactly as you are, whoever and whatever you are. That's the key part of spirituality, and to hold up standards for ourselves in many ways is self-defeating. I mean, I listed those characteristics, and it's true in general. But we have to approach that list in a way that doesn't judge ourselves for it. Every time we fail, there's a reason that we did. When we get angry, it's because there's something in us that wants to protect ourselves. When we're scared, it's the voice of, gosh, I need to keep myself safe. And we can actually be thankful even for that. We can be thankful for your voice of fear that just wants to keep me safe. And these characteristics tend to emerge, but we can't make them. You don't get there by saying, this is what I'm going to do. You don't get there by deciding. You get there by engaging a practice, by forgiving yourself over and over, by orienting yourself in this direction, knowing that all kinds of things will come up. Some of the things you don't like about yourself, the things you do like about yourself, and you just slowly train yourself to appreciate all of that, non-judgmentally. And these are the characteristics that will tend to come. And if those characteristics don't look like what you want in your life, then spirituality might not be for you. As Cloninger points out, this spiritual stuff does run counter to a lot of the values of success, business-oriented, practical, our culture that's oriented that way.
So we have this list, and I'm wondering, well, you said we don't just decide to do it. Well, how do we do it? I mean, we hear a lot about spiritual practice, and so what is that? Is that just me going through the day paying attention? Is it gardening? I mean, what makes up a practice? Am I spiritually practicing right now?
Well, not everything that we do is a spiritual practice. Gardening can be a spiritual practice, or it can be just something that you do. Quilting, or playing the violin, or hiking in the woods, those things can be approached as spiritual practices. They aren't necessarily spiritual practices. In order to approach them as spiritual practice, in order to make something that you do on a regular basis into a spiritual practice, I suggest a few things. First, engage that activity with mindfulness. That is, really sink into your body as you're doing whatever it is, walking along the beach, playing a musical instrument, sewing, arts or crafts, creativity, whatever it is you're doing. Really sink into that moment. One of the things I think that's helpful for that actually is to bring attention to the listening function. Just broaden your sense of the sound around you. Just notice the sound of your environment, and that's a way of being mindful and being fully present to just where you are. Second, I want to suggest that you focus or that you have an intention of cultivating spirituality as you do that activity. You're thinking to yourself, I do want to be a person who has less anxiety. I do want to be a person who has more caring and compassion for others in my life. I do want to feel more connected to myself and nature. And as I do cooking as a spiritual practice or whatever it might be, you have that intention of cultivating those spiritual attributes in mind. Third, engage the activity with a group. So if gardening is your spiritual practice, I want to suggest that you find some other people for whom gardening is a spiritual practice and get together as a group to garden, or at least talk about gardening, as not just gardening as gardening, but gardening as a spiritual practice. Whatever your practice is, have a group that you do it with. And the group serves as a container for your own growing seedling of spirituality. And then the last thing I want to recommend is they're just practices. People pick all kinds of different things and make that into their spiritual practice, but there are some practices that are just for everyone. They form a solid base, a foundation for whatever you pick as your unique individual spiritual practice. So I recommend some silence. Just spend 10, 15 minutes a day sitting in silence, bringing attention to your breath, noticing the thoughts that arise as they come up, and then just notice each thought and set it aside. Return to noticing your breathing coming in and out. Second, spend some time doing some studying of whatever for you is spiritual literature. It might be the book of Psalms from the Bible, or the Bhagavad Gita, or the poems of Walt Whitman or Mary Oliver. And just read some 10, 15 minutes a day of reading from spiritual wisdom each day. And then third is journaling. So you're reading about it, you're sitting in silence, and then you're letting your thoughts come out in reflecting spiritually as you journal, and that helps you articulate your intention, helps you keep focused on what you mean to do.
And you mentioned in that last step, spending 15 minutes to do this and 15 minutes to do that. And you also touched on this theme. My question, where I'm headed with this, is that sounds like an awful lot of work. We're at risking for judging ourselves. We're taking time away from other things that we could be doing. And maybe we're not going to be as task-oriented as we need to do to get the job done. So what I'm asking is, are we just setting ourselves up for defeat here? Can this hurt us and those around us if we escape or spend an hour a day doing a spiritual practice? What would you say to people that might have fears about practicing?
Well, if you're really practically focused, you want to acquire material things. You want to have control over as many. Then you're not going to be interested in this show or in spirituality. That's your interest, and that's the decision that you've made with your life. I would, the only cautionary note I would lift up is that pain and loss and death come for us all. And the ones who have taken some time to plumb their own spiritual depths are the ones who, in those times of harsh life transition that are coming for all of us if they haven't already, the people that have prepared themselves are the ones that can cope with that. They're able to bring their gratitudes even in the midst of loss. They're able to bring acceptance even when things are hard. So that's the upshot. It's what allows you to cope with the fact that your loved ones will die. You will die. There will be sickness. There will be old age. And those things are what life has in store for us. So yeah, you talked about how much time this takes. I said 10 or 15 minutes of study, 10 or 15 minutes of journaling, 10 or 15 minutes of silence. So that's 30 to 45 minutes every single day. And if you don't have that kind of time, then start off with less than that. See if you want to build yourself up to that. But follow your own calling. This can't happen. This can't work if you're only doing it from some grim sense of duty. If it feels joyful for you, add another minute and see if that slowly builds up. You have to follow your own. I mean, this is a path of not judging yourself for not doing it enough, not judging yourself for not being good enough at it. Just let it unfold. Let your own heart be your guide.
I remember, you're going to remind me about who said this, but somebody asked a spiritual master, how long should I meditate every day? I'm a very busy person, and the spiritual master said something like, well, when I wasn't very busy, I was meditating an hour a day. And then I got really busy and the pressures mounted, and now I meditate 2 hours a day. And so there's some sense that this practice can help us be more in the world and be more present. Maybe it's not all about individuality. I mean, we've talked a lot about this. This helps you cope. It helps you have these characteristics. But is there a spiritual practice that we do to heal the world, to make ourselves more present, more active, more socially present, to spread the world and build the world that we want? I mean, isn't it also for other people and other beings?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that begins to happen in spiritual practice, spiritual development, whatever practice it is, whatever tradition it is that you sincerely and devotedly follow, one of the things that happens is a diminishment of the ego defense mechanisms. Yes, we always have it. We always have our attachments. It's what gives our life its flavor and a lot of its meaning, but we don't have to have that death-like grip on them. We can begin to loosen our attachments just a little bit. And when that ego and the need to protect it softens, what we see is that there's no difference between me and the rest of the world. Compassion for others is what naturally arises when you see all of the world as whole, and complete and perfect just as it is, your natural inclination is to caring for this world that is whole and complete, and you just want to be a part of it. You just want to be the loving part of it that you can be. I think I would offer for your own thought experiment that you ask yourself this question. Think of a time when you were not as kind or compassionate as you wish that you had been. You were short with somebody, you lost your temper, you were more scared or anxious than you think you should have been. Think of a time when you weren't really very enlightened. And ask yourself, and then investigate that, explore, asking yourself, what is it that was really going on in me? And what you'll find in each case is that there was some attachment that I was really clinging to, and that's why I behaved that way. And when we soften those attachments, caring and compassion is just what naturally comes out.
So if people who do spiritual practices, and this is now entering into my field, working with very diverse peoples in multiple species situations and all kinds of animals and wildlife medicine that I work with in Central America, we're often challenged with not liking our human species very well, and particular individuals. If in your spiritual practice, Meredith, do you find that you like yourself better, you like other people better, you have a sense of liking other animals better? Does it help us enjoy the beauty that's here on this earth? Or are we still going to be just as mad and fussy at everyone else as we always are?
Well, it's hazardous to predict results, because it's not about getting results, it's about understanding that you are whole and complete exactly as you are. There are these exercises that you can do that tends to have they tend to have certain results, but there's no guarantees in this. It's a little different from physical exercise. If you adopt a new regime of physical exercise, and you stick to that regime, and you have normal health and physiology to begin with, then you will see a smooth curve of physical growth and development. But spiritual development is just all over the place. It's up, it's down. People that have been doing it 20 years still have days when they're as irritable or withdrawn as they ever were. But there's a general tendency that begins to grow. The intentions that we express, loving kindness being a key one, gradually tend to manifest more and more in our lives.
Well, I can see that we're coming up on the end here, but we cannot finish without having our multi-species perspective, because this is the Nurture Nature show where we look at things from a multi-species perspective. And we don't know yet, but it appears that other animals have a sense of spirituality, and the most common one that you hear about are the chimpanzees in Africa, sitting mesmerized at the waterfalls, staring off into space and hootering and hollering. And
a sense of awe.
A sense of awe and wonder, which is all a part of this practice of feeding ourselves, of being present to gratitude and awe and wonder. So let's not forget the other species when we think about, basically what we've been talking about today is spiritual intelligence. And so what is spiritual intelligence? Well, you've just sort of spent this whole show talking about that, but it's basically looking at how we can transcend our ego concerns and perspectives to connect to something greater than ourselves, so we can foster, well, you listed all kinds of things, compassion and kindness and acceptance and just everything that would be good for us and good for our whole world. And it is to connect to life.
It's all about connection.
It is, and it's about nurturing ourselves so we can nurture all of nature. And we hope that is what has happened for you in today's show, that you have been able to be nurtured so that you can nurture all of life. And before we give the closing words, stay tuned for the slides that come after this, because we have reflection questions and suggested actions and resources where you can continue this work and find out more, some of the things that Meredith was talking about, and you can share with other people. So let's wrap it up with these closing words adapted from William Blake. Those who bind to themselves a joy do the winged life destroy. But they who kiss the joy as it flies live in eternity's sunrise. Until next time.